Are you a person that gets hung up on hypotheticals? Do you spend your days wondering about the shoulda, woulda, couldas of life? Well, then I've got quite the Spanish lesson for you today, my friend, and that's what we're going to talk about here today at Jive World. Hey guys, welcome back to our channel. Let's be honest here, saying things like shoulda, woulda, coulda in Spanish, they take a little bit of thinking, and you might just find your brain short-circuiting when you need them in a conversation. But that is exactly the problem we're trying to solve, and it starts today. These might seem like advanced, complicated structures on the surface, but it's actually just a couple of quick patterns or formulas or whatever you want to call them that I'm going to teach you. And just so you know, I'm not just teaching you what your textbook would. You know, the same way that you say shoulda instead of should have, there are alternative ways of saying these things in Spanish that you'll hear on the street, but not really in school. So let's get started. Well, before we actually get started, there are a couple of things and concepts you're going to need to be familiar with already. Sorry for the bait and switch. If you're not familiar with these things, you probably shouldn't watch this video because we're going to be building on these and going even further. Or maybe you're just here for the vibes. I don't know. I can't stop you. I'm just saying. All right, think of this as your shoulda, woulda, coulda toolkit. It's going to be a bit grammary, but just stick with me. Trust the process. First up, the verbs that you will need. Haber, which means to have, and this isn't like I have a house, it's a helping verb. So like in English, I have eaten. That kind of have. Deber, must, or to have to. And poder, can or to be able to. You will also need to know what the conditional is in Spanish, so basically how to put verbs in hypothetical form. We'll be putting those verbs that I mentioned into their conditional forms, so habría, debería, and podría. And lastly, you'll need to know how to make past participles. This sounds like a fancy word, but it's those words that you reach for like eaten and given, as in I have eaten and I have given. So in Spanish, they're the words like comido, llevado, dicho, etc. The irregular ones too. Yes, you're gonna need those. It's important to know these because they're essentially the same building blocks that you're going to be using over and over to build these shoulda, woulda, coulda sentences, so you really can't ignore any part of it. Once you have all these, or at least a basic understanding, we can go from there. Okay, shall we? So let's start out with would have. In Spanish, just as in English, you use this would have for a hypothetical situation in the past. So like, I would have told you, for example. And in Spanish, it all starts with this formula, just two pieces. It's the verb haber in the conditional and a past participle combined. So haber, as I said earlier, it means to have in the sense of a helping verb, like I have eaten. But to get to would have, we have to cross a stepping stone, and that stepping stone is the conditional. So here's haber in the conditional. I'm not going to read them all out loud and drone on, but you can pause and read here if you like. So yo habría, or just habría, is would have. Tú habrías, or just habrías, is you would have. Nosotros habríamos, or just habríamos, is we would have. But would have what? You know, we need the actual verb or the action that the person or persons would have done. And that verb, we're going to use the past participle version of it. So if it's would have given, for example, the verb to give in Spanish is dar. And the past participle is dado. So, yo habría dado. I would have given. But let's go through some more practice examples step by step. So, I would have eaten. First, we have the pronoun I, yo, but this is actually optional in Spanish, so you can just say habría, just by itself. And then you have the past participle, and the verb that we have in hand is comer, and the past participle of comer is comido. So, altogether, it's habría comido. I would have eaten. And that's it, man. You just do it over and over with that same formula. What about you would have driven? So you would have, that's habrías. Habrías is the form for tú. And then we have this verb manejar, which is to drive. So the past participle version of manejar is manejado. So altogether, it's habrías manejado. You would have driven. Isn't it cool how Spanish just sucks it all in? 2 words instead of 4. Gotta love that. So with enough practice, that's pretty easy to get used to, right? But let me teach you something that you won't learn in school. So this form of would have with habría is what's most commonly taught in school, but it's not necessarily what you'll most commonly hear, at least not in a lot of Latin America. That's why I'm just touching on it briefly. What you might hear more is hubiera plus the past participle. So if you recognize hubiera, you'll know that this is technically the past subjunctive, but don't worry about grammar labels for now. When it comes to everyday speech and how people actually say things, those labels become irrelevant. So just take it for what it is. This is another way to say would have. So I would have been, yo hubiera sido, you would have been, tú hubieras sido. So yes, you'll very often hear people say would have with this hubiera form instead of habría all the time. Moving on, let's talk about should have. So to say should have in Spanish, we're going to take what we just learned and build on it a little bit more. So the key verb here, the star of the show, is deber. Deber means must or to have to, as in debes comer más verduras. You have to eat more vegetables. But that's in the normal present tense. We're going to see it in the conditional now. So the formula for should have been is deber in the conditional plus haber, which is unconjugated and always just the same, plus the past participle. So there's more words at play here. There's 3 words, but one of them, haber, is always the same. You don't have to do anything to it. You just have to figure out the first and the last part. So there's more words, but it's not that much work, really. So let's go step by step. Here's deber in the conditional. Once again, I'm not going to read these out loud, so you can pause here and practice if you want to. Yo debería, tú deberías, nosotros deberíamos, etc. Then you have haber, which I just said, it's always in the same infinitive, unconjugated form. Don't touch it, don't do anything to him, leave him alone. That's all you have to do. Isn't that nice for a change? And then same as previously, you have a past participle. So these are words like sido, been, comido, eaten, or caminado, walked. And then you put it all together. So for example, what is you should have come? So you should is deberías, and then you have haber, which is unchanged, we don't do anything to it. Then you have venido, which is the past participle of venir, to come. So, deberías haber venido. You should have come. Debería haberse despertado antes. He should have woken up earlier. But alas, this is also kind of textbooky. It's correct, but it's not always the first thing you're going to hear people say for should have. So here are some other structures you might hear. Deber in the past preterite tense instead of the conditional. So, debiste haber venido. You should have come. And this essentially means the same thing in everyday speech. But the thing is, even both of those, the deberías haber venido and debiste haber venido, they can sound kind of formal or authoritative, and they're also just long, so people don't always even say those. I'm going to give you a third option. This is really informal, but it's common in Latin America. Hubieras venido. This can also mean you should have come. And yes, I know that I just said this can also mean would have, previously for would have, but that's the thing with hubiera. It's really, really flexible and people use it to mean a lot of different things. So yes, technically word for word, it doesn't mean should have, but it's in the sentiment, A good example of this is the phrase, me hubieras dicho, you should have told me. And those are a couple of ways to say should have in Spanish. Okay, last and finally, could have. Because we want to end this video on a positive note, let's talk about the possibilities of life. Could have done this, could have done that. In all seriousness, as you know, could have is used for things that were possible in the past but didn't happen, as in you could have done better on this test. Or for making a guess about something unknown in the past, like, I don't know what that sound was, it could have been anything. So you get the idea, but let's talk about how to say this in Spanish. So we're gonna start with the verb poder. This means can or to be able to, as in, puedo acompañarte? Can I come with you? But we don't want can, we want could. So let's do with this verb what we've done with the other verbs haber and deber. Put it in the conditional. So here are the forms of poder in the conditional. I'll list just a few. So yo podría, tú podrías, nosotros podríamos. So just pause the video and take a second to read these out loud. And so the formula here is just like with should have previously. So it's poder in the conditional plus haber, which is unconjugated, we leave it alone completely, plus a past participle. So one more time, let's walk through these with some examples. It could have been worse. So this pronoun is optional like always, so we can just say podría, it could. Then we have haber, which is the same every single time. We don't change it, we don't do anything. Podría haber. And then the past participle, sido, been. So podría haber sido, it could have been. All we need now is the word for worse, which is, we're having a little Dora moment here. Peor. Podría haber sido peor. Could have been worse. What about we could have helped you? This one's gonna have a kicker, so pay attention. So to start, the we, nosotros, is optional, so we can just say podríamos, we could. Then we have haber, which is the same every single time, so podríamos haber. But let's stop here for a second. So in these shoulda, woulda, coulda sentences, if you have a direct object like you or us or something like that, you're gonna tag it onto the end of haber. This is most common. So then, in this case, it's haberte. Podríamos haberte. And then like normal, we just tack on the past participle at the end. So this verb is ayudar, to help. So the past participle is ayudado. All together now, podríamos haberte ayudado. we could have helped you. So to keep continuity with this textbook versus real speech thing, there's actually another thing people also say for could have instead of podría, and it's pudo. Pudo is the preterite past tense of poder, and so this is basically the same thing that happened with deber earlier for should have. So in the same way that deber went from deberías to debiste, podría can go to pudo. So instead of, for example, podría haber sido peor, it could have been worse, you can also say pudo haber sido peor. It could have been worse. Same thing. Whew, that was tough, but we made it through. You might have already known how to say the traditional shoulda, woulda, coulda phrases, you know, the more textbooky versions, but it's also important to recognize and maybe use from time to time the alternatives that I taught you, because, you know, you'll understand natives better and you can also blend in if that's what you want. There are so many possibilities opened up with advanced grammar. You can go so far beyond just the everyday in your conversations. Like, look at all the things that you can say now. I'm gonna drop off, but in the comments, go ahead and leave a practice phrase using at least one or two of the structures that we learned today. Happy learning and stay Java fluent. See ya.